Hello friends, this is Worm, and today it is Monday, which means we are back with another episode of Exotic Recrafting, the series where we take a look at weak, underused, or straight up bad exotics in Destiny 2 and how we can possibly make them better. And today I decided to talk about Queenbreaker because I actually forgot about this weapon's existence, kind of up there with Truth. But Queenbreaker it's a bad weapon. I don't think this is one that is classed as underused or weak. I think this one is it's straight up, it's not a good gun. I think that you would actively be hurting yourself to use this over literally any other arc heavy weapon in the game. But of course the Queenbreaker is an exotic weapon, an exotic heavy weapon, mind you. And its perks here, it's actually got some really interesting customization. Its perks here, its intrinsic perk is obviously it's a wire rifle, which means it fires a long range, it's linear fusion rifle. Okay, they say a wire rifle, it's a linear fusion rifle. Okay, that's what its exotic trait is. Also, when that bullet hits an enemy, it will blind that enemy, and it will also create a jolt effect on other targets, which, yeah, I mean, sure, whatever, that's fine. But it's very unique in that it has scope options. And it's got some unique set of scopes. So it's got marksman sights and combat sights. I've got it pulled up here, that's why I keep looking over here. But marksman sights are long range sights with slower charge time and greater damage. And then the combat sights are low zoom sights for faster charge time and handling, but of course you're trading that off for damage. It also has hip fire grip and quick draw, which you can switch between, which I think is very interesting. But that's it for the perk. So basically it's a linear fusion rifle that can blind on hits and chain lightning to nearby enemies, which, I mean, I guess on paper that doesn't sound all that bad, but when you get it and you actually use it in game, it just doesn't feel that great. It doesn't feel very strong. I don't even know if it hits as hard as other linear fusion rifles do, for that matter. So I figured that's why, that's why I wanted to talk about it today. But with that being said, I think the important thing to point out here is that this is a weapon that came from Destiny 1, but it had a transition between Destiny 1 and Destiny 2 in that when it was in Destiny 1, it was a special ammo weapon. And Bungie has already said that they're not looking at changing it to a special weapon, but I still think that making this a special weapon is possibly the best thing you could do for this weapon. Like if you made this weapon a special ammo weapon, it would immediately jump way up in usage. Like you would see it a lot more. You'd see it more in the Crucible. You'd see it more in PvE. I think that the best thing you can do for this weapon is make it a special weapon, just like we had it back in Destiny 1. I don't know why they changed it so that it's not a special weapon anymore, because mind you, this didn't come out in D2's launch. This came out with Forsaken. Forsaken is when they actually added special ammo weapons back into the game. So there's not really a reason, in my opinion, on why this is heavy. And I don't know why Bungie continues to say, no, we're going to keep it as a heavy weapon when they're not gonna do anything else with it. But besides just changing it into a special weapon, which I think is that's the easy way out. You want to see more usage, change it to a special weapon. That would make me use it definitely more. But I think that if you're going to change it, or if you're going to keep it as a heavy weapon, we need to make some fundamental changes to this weapon. Now, for starters, obviously the scope sights are really cool. But I think what needs to happen with the scopes, I think that with the marksman sights, you need to have a lot more aim assistance, and I think that you should ramp up the damage just a little bit more. I don't know exactly the damage difference between the two, but I know that I don't ever use marksman sights. It doesn't feel really worth it to use marksman sights, in my opinion, because the combat sights just, I mean, it just works better. And the range at which you're using it, like the marksman sights, doesn't make a difference between marksman and combat sights. So combat sights is typically the way to go. Marksman sights, I think, should increase that damage even further. But also I think that you could actually potentially tie in more of the exotic intrinsic trait with these scopes. So when you're using the marksman scope, how about when using the marksman scope, when you hit a target, there is a massive blinding effect around that target. So currently you shoot an enemy, it blinds that enemy. So if you're up against an ogre, for example, an unstoppable ogre, yeah, you can stagger that ogre. But imagine the ability to cause a big explosion when you hit, say, a precision shot. Cause a big explosion, and that explosion will then blind all the enemies in a certain radius, a rather large radius around it. But maybe you don't like that. Maybe you want to use the combat sights instead. The combat sight should have some sort of, a different thing. Maybe the combat sight is the one that jolts targets. So it jolts, it shocks the enemies around it. If you're using the combat sight, if you're using the marksman sight, you get that massive blinding effect. It would kind of allow it to fill different roles within the game. I also think that between these two sights, you should have the ability to switch between them by clicking and holding your reload button, doing a special reload similar to something like Mana Core, similar to something like Hard Light in the fundamentals, stuff like that. Like holding X should allow you to change which scope you're using, because that would instantly make this weapon able to intrinsically stagger unstoppable champions and overload champions. And anytime there's a weapon that can intrinsically handle both, it immediately skyrockets in usage. I mean, look at chill clip fusion rifles, for example. Chill clip fusion rifles have the ability to stagger unstoppable champions and overload champions, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And I think that if you did that with each of these, with these different sights here, you would have you'd have a pretty powerful weapon that you could use in in-game content. Now, another thing, this is completely unrelated to to the whole thing, but if Bungie, if you're not going to change, allow us to hold reload to switch scopes, you need to allow us to change perks in the middle of a strike, because currently, like in a Grandmaster Nightfall, you can't change the scopes. Even though you have the weapon equipped, you can't change between the marksman sight and the combat sights. I think that's ridiculous. I think that needs to change, but that's a side note. But yeah, that's it for the the scopes there. And then of course we have the other perks where we got hipfire grip and quick draw. These two perks, in my opinion, lend themselves to PvP related stuff, and this exotic, it being a heavy weapon, it doesn't feel like really worth it to use in PvP, especially when you've got just better options. Like, Sleeper Simulant is also a linear fusion rifle, and with Sleeper Simulant you can one-shot somebody in the body. Like with this weapon, you still have to get a crit, and I think that's weird. I think it's a weird choice to put these two there. I would say we change these two perks for just more PvE related perks. Have maybe Rampage, maybe you have Dragonfly, maybe Firefly, just something cool like that. I think could add on to it tremendously. I think with this one, obviously with it being arc damage, it's a wire rifle, which is what the Fallen use. Like maybe not Firefly, because Firefly does a solar damage effect. I think keeping this within the arc realm of existence is a pretty good idea. But I think that also you could potentially add another perk here, a new unique perk that will allow kills to amplify the user. This way, if you're not using Arc 3.0, you have yet another way, another tool in your kit to potentially go amplified. Because currently, I think the only way to get amplified if you're not on an Arc subclass is by using Exdirus, which is a special weapon, which is great and all to use. It's fine to get to amplified, but I think just giving players another option, just in case they want to use a void SMG on their void kit, but they still want to be amplified. Like, I think that would be very beneficial to this weapon. But other than that, I also think the last thing, and this is not really anything to do with the perks here, but one of the other things that Bungie could do for this is just make it more sticky in terms of aim assistance. This weapon was known in Destiny 1 for its just general stickiness. Like, it would snag crits in the Crucible like crazy, and being that it is a heavy weapon and heavy ammo is not on the field that often, I don't really see a problem with doing this. In fact, actually, way back in the day, this was the Gambit go-to weapon because it was so sticky. You could absolutely nail people from across the map by shooting them in the torso. I think that just increasing that aim assistance back up to what it was, or when you're using the marksman sights especially, give it that really chunky crit zone. Because one of the reasons why this weapon is weak is it's a linear fusion rifle. Linear fusions aren't really popular picks right now because their damage is I got a damage nerf couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, a couple seasons ago, something like that. But also, like, its perks are so weak here. And I think that if you combine kind of all of that stuff together, the ability to blind targets, which it already does have the ability to blind targets, but I mean like a blinding explosion around targets. You have the ability to with the marksman sight, with the combat sight, you can jolt targets or kill targets with jolt. If you zap a drag, it zaps all the other drags around it. But also, I think, changing the scope so that you can actually change it mid-strike, mid-run, like, click and hold X to change between the marksman and the combat size. I think that would be huge. And of course, in that additional perk column, like, it's nice that they gave us two different perk options, which is really uncommon for exotic weapons. Very, very uncommon. I still think that this is just not... I mean, they're PvP related perks, like hipfire grip. It just ain't it. If we're just going to be honest with ourselves, this is not it. And then of course quick draw, again, it's a heavy weapon. We're not using heavies very often. I think just change these out for some more PvE related perks that can do, you know, serve players better inside of PvE. But yeah, I mean, that's Queenbreaker. It's such a cool weapon. I think that really the best thing, the absolute best thing Bungie could do for it is change it back into a special weapon. I know that they talk about how they don't want to change it to a special weapon and whatnot, but like it needs to be a special weapon again. That would immediately bring it back onto the street. And like, if you change it to a special weapon, I don't think you'd have to change anything else about it. Just make it a special weapon or do those other changes. One or the other, not both. Like, I think it'd be a little bit busted to have a special weapon that does all the stuff that it, you know, all the other suggestions that we had. But yeah, that's the Queenbreaker. It's a pretty depressing exotic. I didn't do this one sooner because I actually forgot it existed. I saw a tier list or something on social media the other day, and I looked and I was like, oh my god, I forgot about that weapon. Like, yeah, that deserves to be in the last place, because that's where it was put. It's put on the last place of somebody's tier list. But yeah, with that being said, I want to hear your thoughts on Queenbreaker. Do you think it is I mean, here's my thing. There's no way you could think it is not a, like, there's no way you could think that it's a good option when literally everything else does anything that this weapon does better. So tell me how you feel about it, how you feel about the changes, how you would personally want to see it fixed. Just let me know all that stuff in the comments. Of course, if you like today's video, do me a favor, drop a like, it helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe for more daily Destiny content. And guys, do me a favor, watch the videos you see here on the end screen, because for whatever reason, YouTube thinks you'll like them. We'll see y'all next time. Bye for now.